Hi, my name is Ryan Grayson, and I'm here to talk about the Second Industrial Revolution. First, I'm going to talk about the advancements in industries. First, the steel industry. The Industrial Revolution improved the amount of steel that could be produced. Before the Industrial Revolution, steel was very expensive and it was produced in small quantities. Steel is widely used now because of its high tensile strength and low cost. The problem of creating inexpensive steel was solved in 1855 by Henry Bessemer. He invented the Bessemer converter. The steel has much better strength and durability than iron. The Siemens-Martin process was slower and easier to control, further lowering steel production costs. The Siemens-Martin process was the leading steel-making process by the early 20th century. The availability of cheap steel allowed for larger railroads, bridges, skyscrapers, and ships. Other important steel products include the steel cable, steel rod, and sheet steel, which enabled high tensile strength steel for machinery. Next are chemicals. The start of the production of chemicals in large quantities, for a variety of reasons, coincided with the beginnings of the Second Industrial Revolution. One of the first chemicals was sulfuric acid. In 1736, the pharmacist Joshua Ward developed a process for its production that involved heating saltpeter and allowing for the sulfur to oxidize and combine with water. John Roebuck and Samuel Garbett were the first to establish a large-scale factory for the production of chemicals. The LeBlanc process was patented in 1791 by Nicolas Leblanc. The LeBlanc process was a method that produced alkali from sea salt. The soda industry was huge for Great Britain. When tariffs on the salt were repealed, the British output of 200,000 tons of soda annually exceeded that of all other nations combined. There are methods developed that introduced ways to best use the excess alkali. Large chemical industries took place in Germany and then later in the United States. Next is electricity. British scientist Michael Faraday discovered the electrical current in 1831. He determined this by using a magnet and a coil of wire. Samuel Morse invented the electric telegraph, which changed communication forever. His Morse code was used by the telegraphs. The first telegraphic message was sent on May 24, 1844. Next is how Germany became an industrial power. Germany had an abundance of natural resources. They had large coal deposits and iron reserves. There were challenges after the Napoleonic War. Only major ports of Hamburg and Bremen had access to the North Sea. Even with that, they lacked access to Atlantic trade routes. The most significant challenge towards German industrialization was the fragmentation of Germany. There were many different German states, and Prussia was the largest. Prussia eventually became the most powerful economic state as well. The Napoleonic Wars halted German industrialization. In 1818, Prussia moved to counter problems with the post-Napoleonic era. Many hailed the Prussian tariff policy. The Zollverein proved to be the greatest factor for the economic development of the German states. The Zollverein grew from the Prussian tariff of 1818 to a full-fledged customs union that became a catalyst for German unification. Germany became the continent's major producer of coal, iron, and steel after 1850. The key to success for Germany was their abundance of coal and iron deposits. German economic Friedrich List rejected laissez-faire and said that Germany needed to place high tariffs on imports from Britain. List's ideas helped lead to the creation of the Zollverein in 1834. German succession in the Franco-Prussian War also led to the unification of Germany. Next is how advancements in transportation and communication affected trade. Before the steam engine, raw materials and finished goods were hauled on horse-drawn wagons. In the early 1800s, Robert Fulton built the first commercially successful steamboat. By the mid-19th century, steam-powered ships were carrying manufactured textiles and goods throughout the Atlantic for trade. Along with the steamboat, in the early 1800s, British engineer Richard Trevithick constructed the first railway steam locomotive. By 1850, Britain had more than 6,000 miles of railroad track. Additionally, around 1820, Scottish engineer John McAdam developed a new process for road construction. His technique resulted in roads that were smoother, more durable, and less muddy. Because of the steam-powered locomotive, raw materials and finished goods were transported much quicker, resulting in greater profits from trade. In 1837, two Brits, William Cooke and Charles Wheatstone, patented the first commercial electric telegraph. By 1840, railroads were a Cooke-Wheatstone system. In 1866, a telegraph cable was successfully laid across the Atlantic. By being able to communicate much faster, news and events and global talks occurred much faster. Next were the hazards of industrial life. Wages for people who worked in factories were low. Working conditions were dangerous and monotonous. Unskilled labor had little job security, and they were easily replaceable. Children were a real part of the workforce. Children took on the hazardous tasks, such as cleaning the machinery. In fact, in the early 18th century, approximately one-fifth of the workers in the textile industry were children under the age of 15. Industrialized areas were unable to keep pace with the overflow of workers from the countryside. What resulted was inadequate, overcrowded housing. Polluted, unsanitary living conditions caused the rapid spread of disease. However, at the end of the 19th century, living conditions were improved as the government instituted various labor reforms and workers gained rights to form trade unions. Because of the overcrowding, housing was polluted as well. The Industrial Revolution introduced new types of water and air pollution. Because of the large-scale use of coal, there were a large amount of smog and soot emissions. These smog and soot emissions had serious health impacts on the residents of growing urban centers. Next are the reactions to industrialization. Initially, workers responded to the harsh working conditions by changing jobs frequently. They did poor quality work when not closely watched. Workers also engaged in riots or strikes. Workers gradually started creating organizations for collective action. These groups were benevolent societies and trade unions. These efforts by workers led to the investigation of working conditions by the British government. The Factory Act of 1833, the Mines Act of 1842, and the repeal of Corn Laws in 1846 were legislative decisions that helped improve life for the working class. Women's rights made slow progress towards the achievement of economic, legal, and education equality in North America. Many working-class women did not participate in women's rights movements. Economic circumstances forced women to take jobs outside the home. By doing this, they contributed to the transformation of gender relations. Successful men and women of mixed ethnicity faced less discrimination in Latin America than they did in the United States. The expansion of public education and industrialization went hand in hand. Education was somewhat required for workers. The change in education from limited provision to widespread hierarchical education systems. Education became much more important. To have better workers, they must be educated. Education spread to women as well, as they were allowed to attend public school. Next is a comparison of capitalism and socialism. Capitalism and socialism are the two main economic systems. The fundamental difference between the two lies in the amount of government intervention within the economy. Capitalism is a market-driven economy. The state does not intervene within the economy. The market forces shape society and life. Property and business are controlled by individuals. The production and prices of goods and services are determined by how in demand they are and how difficult they are to produce. This drives companies to make the best products as cheaply as they can. There's an emphasis on efficiency over quality. In a capitalist economy, the state does not directly employ the workforce. This can lead to unemployment during economic recession. Socialism is characterized by the state ownership of businesses and services. Central planning is used to attempt to make society more equitable. In some socialist models, worker cooperatives have primacy over production. Other socialist models allow individual ownership of enterprise and economy, but with high taxes and strict government controls. The primary concern of the socialist model is an equal redistribution of wealth and resources from the rich to the poor. Even during economic hardships, there is full employment, and if workers are not performing tasks that are in demand, for the market. Most countries have a mixed economy with government intervention, but not excessive. Some countries include a private sector of capitalism and a public sector of socialism. Lastly is how industrialization impacts imperialism. Imperialism is the practice of creating a web of colonies. There are many reasons industrialization led to imperialism. The powers needed resources to industrialize. Resources were cheaper in the colonies. Therefore, countries wanted to gain colonies to gain cheaper resources. Industrialized powers also needed a place to sell their products. A country's colonies were a great place to sell their products. Countries knew that they could rely on colonies to purchase their products, which further contributed to imperialism. Having colonies also allowed a country to protect its world trade. By establishing colonies in the Pacific, it allowed for ships to be able to stop, refuel, and resupply. Also, if a war to occur, these colonies could act as bases for military operations. Thank you for listening.